Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session today with the Centre Mary Seery Kearney. Mary's our DPO for the ERF and is great supporter of the ERF and also of the ERF Skillnet. This session today is sponsored by the ERF Skillnet. And obviously, if there's any training that you were looking for in the new year, by all means, give me a shout and we will try to facilitate that as best we can. For now, I will just pass you over to Mary and say thank you, Mary, for supporting us today.
Not at all. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to do this. What we're going to do today is go through AI and data protection at quite a macro level, really, and then I suppose from the feel of the questions coming in at the end, we can then come back and revisit it if there are specific issues arising. So we'll do that. I'll just share a set of slides with you, if that's okay. Oh no, here's one I prepared earlier. Is that good? Okay. So we're looking at, the essential do's and don'ts of AI versus GDPR. And I suppose maybe let's begin by assuming a baseline understanding of what we're doing and what AI brings us to. So AI is about a computer system carrying out tasks that up till now only humans really were expected to be able to do. It is an umbrella term for a number of things that you'll hear talk about: machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing. So I'll give you a couple of examples of those and what they mean. So first of all, machine learning is really where the algorithm creates a self-learning and is learning from the data that it is munching through all of the time, so that it can then predict outcomes, predict forward outcomes. So where you encounter this on a daily basis is maybe in Netflix, in the recommender systems, because you watched this, you might be interested in that. On Amazon, from book recommendations to product recommendations, they are drawing together, let's say on Amazon, for instance, they will draw together that if you are buying rolling pins and cookie cutters of a particular, well, then this is your area of interest. And they know from the millions of other people that are buying those products, what other things were they likely to buy? And they're munching that mass data to make it a more sellable product to you, and to say, well, you were interested in this and maybe you would do this. So that's where we understand, or that's where we daily encounter machine learning without actually giving any consideration to the fact that this is AI in action. Also, if you go into WhatsApp and you text, or you go into your messaging and you press the microphone and it converts your voice into text, that's also machine learning. It's learning from your voice. You will see predictive text come up, and that is machine learning. I'm trying to predict what you're going to do next. Natural language processing is, again, another subset of AI. You'll see that in Siri. You'll see it at home. If you have a voice activated assistant in the house. And also the system that goes through your emails to try and pull out and identify what is spam. That is natural language processing, because it's processing the language in the emails to go, is this a true email, or is this spam? Is this selling you something? So it has an objective when it is trying to identify. So they're things that you don't even think about, but you're encountering AI all of the time. Deep learning is a facility that probably recruiters are moving into using, and some are already, I know, using. And that is like a neural network in your head. So there are different layers of input into the machine. And we know where the input is going in. We don't necessarily know what's going on in the black box of the machine, but it puts out an output. And that's for analyzing really large volumes of data. So if you put in a search for a particular candidate or type of candidate through the LinkedIn system that's there, you're dealing with deep learning when you're doing that. And if you're using an interviewing process where AI is doing your interviewing for you, that is deep learning, where an awful lot of things are being analyzed based on the data within the AI process and within the AI system, the data that it previously has, and it is making predictions and recommendations based on that. But the entirety of how it is doing it, it is accumulating knowledge and perfecting and growing the same way as we do as human beings, using our neural networks in our heads. So if you're using those sort of programs, that is what's going on. And that leads me on to maybe having a look at what sort of programs is recruitment using at the moment. So the sort of programs that the recruitment industry are looking for are ones that don't just do hiring or don't just do HR, but actually are capable of engaging from a hiring point of view. Because we live in a global world, if you put up an advertisement now for a job, you may get an application from anywhere in the world for that. As a result, the traditional numbers of applicants are significantly larger than they ever were before. So from a hiring perspective, there is going through the CVs, going through the applications, then there is its use and deployment in interviewing and in recommender systems. So from that perspective, that's where we see that it is recruitment centric, are the things that are being sought from AI programs. It needs to have machine learning capabilities where you have candidate matching, resume screening, and then also interview scheduling. There are standalone programs that are not just HR management, because there are those, but this is a standalone that is all about the recruitment process in itself, and that it can be focused and adaptable for the specific type of recruitment that you are recruiting for. So here is a sample of some of the systems that are being used. Eightfold is an intelligent talent acquisition system. It looks for skills and potential and predicts on potential based on work experience and skills. Zoho Recruit, I'm not recommending any of these. I'm just telling you what's out there and what I've maybe come across in consultations with companies. So Zoho Recruit is for a smaller companies. They're using that as an AI recruiting tool. Skillet it ranks candidates by their relevance to, and that's a skills matching program that is used. HireView does video interviews, and it is AI-powered interview analysis. So that is reading more than the answers that are giving. That is reading facial tics. It is assessing people from a whole heap of other things, and that brings us into a whole ethical situation that I'll address in a few minutes, and in what data is being gathered. Yeah, then there's all of the LinkedIn tools, and then there are bespoke AI created programs for specific companies, and some companies are large enough to actually make their own AI program and to customize it for their own company if you're at that very high end of the and large end of the recruitment industry. So there are obligations. We have the AI Act, the EU AI Act coming in. We have GDPR. So the first thing that every company and every organization that needs to do is to create an AI exposure register. So you need, as an organization, to assess how is AI being deployed? Because a little bit like I've said to you about the spam, going through your emails from a language learning process to filter out what is spam and what is not spam. There's an AI system that you're using that you're probably not aware of. So there are things that companies right now have been using AI for quite some time, but just don't even realize it. But most of us, on our phones all of the time, there's AI coming at us that we don't even consider. So you need to do a register of what AI is your company currently using. Do people have ChatGPT on their desktops? what are they using it for? And what is the exposure within that? You know, what are the risks? It's like creating a risk register of, well, what are the risks in using these systems? You know, for instance, if you create something that's a really super method of recruitment, it's new and it's novel to you, and you're putting it into ChatGPT for spell checks and grammar checks and things, ChatGPT is pulling that in your intellectual property. It is storing your intellectual property for future use. There is a risk if your staff are doing that. So in a way, you should only ever be pulling information out of those sort of programs and then using it for your own purposes. But you should never be putting your own information into it because you are sharing and diluting your intellectual property. And there's all sorts of other follow-ons that could occur from that. So you need an AI exposure register, and then that you're calculating what are the risks, what are what are the risks around this. That needs to happen right now for everything you have, a bit like the data map that we all had at the beginning of GDPR. So you need to know that if you're buying in programs, what data set was it trained on? Where was the data set that it was trained on? You know, do you know where it was bought from? What data set was used? Is it appropriate for your own use and your deployment within your company? Then, if you're future buying in a program, they're the sort of questions you need to look at, and we'll go into those in more specifics in a few minutes. You are obliged to establish a governance structure over the management of the risks around AI. So as I've just said, you know, are you loading your intellectual property into an AI system? Is it serving you, or is it managing you? You need to be very careful. There are distinct things there, that you make sure, because these are systems that are gathering information all of the time. And I suppose to give you an example of maybe how the neural aspect of AI works. If you are on, so for instance, I'm running in the general election, God love me, but I have to do these coffee mornings, and I did a coffee morning for a particular interest group that I've been supporting for years last Saturday morning on the area of apartment defects. So I work with particular people. We're in a WhatsApp group together. We share all that information with each other. If I do a speech about apartment defects and supporting people, they put it into, I send it to them in that WhatsApp group. They share it in another WhatsApp group with other owners. If my videos go up on social media, they like them. So with the coffee morning last Saturday morning, a woman came in that I know who was in the location that I was in. And then another woman who was with her was her sister, who lives in Portarlington. I had been suggested to her sister as a friend on Facebook, because the system is looking at where are all the connections in our lives? How does all that work? How can we put together people to hold our attention on social media, hold our attention for longer, because our attention is what's being commodified. So when you're doing a governance structure on the use of an AI, you need to know, where is that data coming from? Whose data is it? Is it ethically gathered as a training data set? Because if you go on the Data Protection Commission's website, you will see where there have been investigations into social media giants on the inappropriate and unethical use of data sets and the data from social media being trained. You need to know that you're not buying something that was unethically trained. So they're the sort of things you need. So you need a competence within your company, have a checklist in your company, or to buy in that expertise, to say, okay, what are we straying into an area where by the default of buying this system, we are finding ourselves already bought into an unethical system that will attract the attention of the DPC. So you need to be clear about what is the objective you are trying to achieve in the deployment and use of AI in your company. You need to be making sure, as indeed we'll do this so looking at what is the purpose, what is the goals for us Is it, you know, better customer service? And so you're going to have a chat program that is on your website that engages with people, and that provides a more instant customer service for your candidates, for your clients. And that if we want to optimize operations, because the fact is, AI isn't going to take our jobs, but it will take the business for those who are not using AI. So we all need to move to a place where we're embracing and we're using AI. It is a very positive support to businesses. It does assist in decision making. It does do all of those things. It is really positive. And companies who use it will be more efficient and more attractive. But at the same time, you've got to know that the systems that you're buying, if you're buying in rather than creating bespoke systems, that they are ethical in their gathering, that you've got to know what is the scope and capacity of this, and are we deploying it correctly? So I'll give you an example. If you have an AI data set that is trained on, let's say, the population of Detroit. So I read this as a case study as part of my own learning in AI and my own qualification in looking at the deployment of AI. So they said if you have so 2 years ago, if you were to look at the population and look into the statistics around the population of Detroit, Detroit had higher than average unemployment rate, and that's across all sectors of society, regardless of skin color or, you know, ethnic origin or how people identify. Regardless of it, it has a higher than average unemployment rate. It has a higher than average criminality rate. And if you look at the statistics for people who are imprisoned in Detroit, they predominantly come from the Black community. And there are a million reasons for that: poverty, disadvantage, you know, systemic oppression. There are a load of reasons for that. But if your AI data set is adding those two things together and is learning on those two things and pulling in those statistics, it will arrive at a conclusion that if you're from a Black community, you're more likely to be involved in criminality and you're more likely to be unemployed. And obviously, there is a massive prejudicial bias in the conclusions drawn by the AI system. It is profiling people highly inappropriately, unethically, and contrary to their human rights. So, and also drawing fundamentally wrong conclusions. So the interrogation of where did the data training come from that is making predictions about the data that you're going to feed into or you're going to deploy this AI system on? Where is it coming from? And is it going to lead you down a road where there are going to be biased outcomes? And I mean, bias is the big thing in AI, but it is really important because if you ignore bias, if you ignore the possibility and say, well, this is going to be okay, this is going to be Ireland. Well, in Ireland, depending on where you're born, depending on what community you're born in, you may be more likely to illness. You may be higher on the register of disabilities. Across our own demographic, even in Dublin, depending on the location. If you were to profile the communities, you may draw a conclusion about a specific area of Dublin that is an area of high social deprivation, and say, well, there's a higher level of crime, there's a higher level of disability, there's a higher level of illness, of unemployment. Well, there is, because of systemic issues. But you couldn't draw conclusions about the appropriateness and the ability of any one applicant from that community to be able to work and to be able to successfully join the workplace. So it is really important that you interrogate this, that you set out those purpose and goals, and that you look at your data quality and the privacy of that. What is it exposing you to? You know, what is that data set exposing you to as an organization? Then you've got to look at, you know, is there a skills gap in your organization? Make sure that people are trained, that they're trained to look out for these things and to give good consideration, because ignorance will not be an excuse if you fall foul of the Data Protection Commission or of employment equality law. So that's really important. There are ethical, I've missed my ethical one, have I? There are ethical considerations. So just check it. Yeah, it is. Yeah, so there are ethical considerations there that needs to be given due care. GDPR law, and we're going to move on to that in specific. Employment equality law. There are 9 protected categories. People who have a right not to be discriminated against. You've got to make sure that your AI program is not discriminating against people. We see it in you make online applications in healthcare, for health insurance, for finance and security. There are applications like that that are sensitive. You need to be making sure that there isn't an automated decision making that's disproportionately finding against young people, and that's disproportionately against, pardon me, older people. So you've got to give all of those considerations, and the law and the regulations. You've got to consider that and write that into policies, because you need to be monitoring. First of all, have a policy from the outset that sets out the deployment, the risk, the program that you're using, how it's going to be deployed, the objectives of the company in using that AI system. Then look at the objectives of the of how it's going to be evaluated if you're showing a disproportionate number of candidates arising out of it. If you're showing trends that more women are being selected than men, more men than women, more men in a particular age category or women in a particular age category. If there are biases showing, they need to be identified very, very quickly, and you need a system in place to make sure that they are being identified quickly. So looking at very GDPR specific, the rules of GDPR in the EU AI Act, I think GDPR is only mentioned maybe once, maybe twice. In the recitals, it's more prevalent, but in the overall Act, it's only mentioned, I think, twice, and I'd nearly say it's only once. But GDPR stands anyway. Just because you move into an arena in AI doesn't mean that you are all of a sudden in an arena where GDPR does not apply. GDPR applies in exactly the same way. You must make sure that there is lawfulness, that there is fairness, that there is transparency, that the fairness is proportionately applied, and that data retention rules are being used, that all of those things are still happening and still in place. Looking at the transparency and the information, you must inform your candidates that you are going to be using AI. It has to be in your privacy policy and your privacy notice that AI is there, that AI is going to be deployed. In an ideal world, you will use the name of the program. You will be able to share that. You need to have done a risk assessment of what are the consequences for its use? What are the consequences here? What will happen? How will you be screening for particular age groups, for particular genders? Will people with disabilities be afforded the same opportunities? Will there be things like that? So you need to have an internal policy that reviews that. You need to carry out a data processing impact assessment. You need to make sure that you're putting that in place. Then in looking at, minimization and proportionality, you need to be making sure that you're only collecting the necessary data that is for the specific objective that you're hoping to achieve. That it's not pulling in much more information that you need when you're deploying an AI system. You have to be specific and make sure that you're capable of checklisting the categories of information that you're looking for and making sure that it is achieving that specific purpose. So this is again where your data processing impact assessment, for each time you deploy it at a high level for a particular candidate campaign, that you have considered those risks and you have a system of mitigating against those those risks, and consequently you're meeting your purpose limitation program. Then the next thing is, what are the rights of the individuals? Data subjects, or the people whose data will be used, the data subjects who are being pulled in, they still have the right of having access to their personal data. the report that is created about them through the AI program. They have a right to see that. They will have a right to rectify it if they have a problem with it. They have a right to be forgotten. And you must make sure that the system allows for that. They have a right to object to automated decision making. And if you are using AI to make decisions and make recommendations on candidates, there must be a system of appeal, and that individuals can appeal to a human being, and if they have been rejected, to know why. What were the decision-making factors? How do you make sure you substantiate that? If your company is in an employment law arena, like the Workplace Relations Commission, on a discrimination claim, can you prove that actually the people who were rejected have been reviewed, their data has been reviewed, that you have the objectivity and working against bias has been catered for? How do you prove that? And you need to have that and that's where we come back to the data processing impact assessment. But data subjects will still always have their rights, even though the use of AI does not mean that that we suddenly don't apply all of those systems. So any reports that are created by AI, your data subjects will have the right to apply to them, and to have a human to see them, and to have a human review them. So this is very much the automated decision making. If there is an opinion being expressed, there has to be a human that opinion can be contested to. And there must be transparency about the decisions that were made. So you must create a complaint mechanism that makes sure that you are overseeing that you have, and that complaint mechanism is in your in your privacy notice, that it's out there in the public domain, that anybody who engages with your organization knows exactly how to make a complaint, how to invoke the position of a human making a decision. So from a data security, you need to know that you're not going to be, that your technical and your organizational measures are sufficiently to ensure that the data is secure, that it is held, that your privacy infrastructure and architecture in your company is such that it is protecting the data. Reports aren't left, that you have clean desk policies, that you have remote working policies, to make sure that the deployment of AI is not leading itself to breaches of confidentiality, breaches of cybersecurity, that your cloud mechanism, storage mechanism, is of sufficiently high standard, that it cannot be breached, that it cannot be hacked. You will still have to ensure that you you will make a data breach notification in the event that there is a breach. But in the use of AI, how will you know that a breach? And are you confident that you know when a breach has occurred? Are you confident that you're able to identify how a breach might occur and when it would occur? And this is where, if you have a bought-in system and you're using it over a program that is in software hosted by another company and a third party, that you need to know what their security standards are, that you're not exposed by default. And if you wake up tomorrow morning and Morning Ireland says, oh, there was a massive data breach in the States from X company, will you automatically identify that as being the company that is supplying you, or is the parent company of your AI system? And if you have put your candidate data into that program, is your candidate data safe? Is it encrypted and encapsulated and saved from a parent company exposure? So they're the sort of things from a GDPR perspective that you've got to anticipate and you've got to look at. So that is where that brings us into algorithm accountability, making sure that you're reducing bias, making sure that there is fairness in the system, and that you're mitigating any possible review, any possible possibility of bias, because it will bring you into the 9 protected categories under the Employment Equality. And remember, once somebody applies for a job, they're automatically covered by the Employment Equality Acts, and any decision that they deem that was discriminatory is automatically actionable. You don't have to be an employee to invoke the protections of that act. So then you need a system where you're evaluating the outcomes, where you're watching that all of the time. And in impact assessments, this is where a data protection impact assessment is absolutely vital, where you're identifying the risks, you're looking at what are the data subject access rights, and that you're mitigating those potential. You're putting in place a list of protocols that are going to assist you and that are going to make sure that that any of those risks have a counterbalance that safeguards the data subject rights of anybody whose data is being used. And your system must always be a protection and privacy by design and by default. That is a requirement. So if you are integrating a shelf product into your company and into your organization, then you must make sure that you're interrogating and asking the questions. If you're part of the creation of a particularly bespoke AI program, then the AI Act will start coming into being for you, and there will be user risks. There will be the certification and the making sure that it is competent and qualified. Those systems will come into place for you, that you need to make sure that they're available. But also, if you can start that you are transparent about the use, if people have can do settings, if they can opt out of being AI screened, if they can request reports as privacy friendly as you can be and as rights based as you can be. If you can adopt that kind of an attitude, then you're less likely to ever fall foul of any of the organization, any of the GDPR aspects here. A last area where this is really important is looking across border. So you may be inputting data or using a program that's pulling in data, but the program is being run across a border outside of the EU. You need to consider that. You need to have standard contractual clauses in the engagement and in the data processing agreement that you have with that organization that is supplying you, that third-party organization that is supplying you with an AI program. In the same way as you would in any other place. If you're accountant, if you're payroll, all of those, you need data processing agreements. They all stand up normally. But you also need a cross-border transfer protocol and in place. Candidates whose data may be likely to cross borders need to be made aware of it prior to the crossing of a border, in the same way as they would do if there was a decision maker in California, a decision maker outside of the EU. If there is a decision maker in the form of an AI program across a border, people need to know that in advance before any decisions are made about them, and before they give you their data, they need to be advised on that. So that is particular to any one campaign. It may well be that information is just coming up in that context. And so that kind of is, the last area is that you are reviewing. So review your privacy notice, your data protection policy, and your data processing agreements to make sure that the use of AI is properly explained. Both your privacy notice is your external document out to the public for anyone before that they should be able to read and have access to before they ever give you any of their data. Your data protection policy is your internal document, your protocol and procedures internally. And then your data processing agreements must reflect that use of AI. You should have an AI specific policy so that you have something that you can, if somebody complains, if somebody in your organization, everybody should be trained on your AI policy. That needs to deal with everything from the use of it, the ensuring on intellectual property, copyright, trade secrets. What about your temporary agency workers? Are you deploying people into areas that are going to be using and into fields that are going to be using AI? If that's the case, you also need to be amending your contract with your clients to make sure that in the same way as people have access to GDPR, they must be trained in the GDPR standards within the company that a temporary agency worker is deployed. You need an indemnity against any breaches in those instances. The same in the use of AI. if a temporary agency worker who is your employee uses AI in the client company, you need an indemnity in your terms and conditions with that client company to make sure that you are indemnified against any exposure, any risks, any breaches that occur in that area. You must have a data processing impact assessment for every use, every campaign deployment of AI, so that you're being really, really thorough on that. And at the end, that's me. That's my bit. And now I'm happy to answer questions.
This afternoon. Hi, Mary. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. Just going to see what questions are coming. Okay, so there's one that's come in. Some consultants may be using programs like ChatGPT with servers in the US for candidate summaries. The company still retains the GDPR responsibility and any associated fines. I would assume this is a huge risk, as ignorance is not a defense under GDPR? Question mark.
Okay, so you're putting in information and seeking a summary back out from ChatGPT. You need to have a system where the use of ChatGPT is in your privacy notice. The fact that it may be used for candidate summaries is in your privacy notice. The fact that that is a service that is hosted abroad. It's not a program like we used to have years ago where you download it, it's in your computer and it's not going anywhere else. So that is information. If it is without names, if it is without anything that would say, Mary, okay, if you introduce me as senator, that kind of narrows down who I could possibly be. There's only 2 senators at the moment in Ireland that are both Marys. So it narrows down and starts identifying who we are. But if you take the Mary out of it, then that's one of 60 people it could be. If you take the senator out of it and it's just a person and it is their qualifications and maybe their areas of work. So maybe consider what goes into ChatGPT, whether it actually hits the bar for personal data. It may well be that it doesn't. So there's a way to mitigate the risk there.
Sorry, it was on mute. What is the official statement from the EU about the selection algorithms used in recruiting? Is there an official statement?
Well, the AI Act is being rolled out. I'm part of a task force within the World Employment Confederation, and at the moment we are working on, and I'm working on behalf of the ERF on looking at AI toolkits, looking at the rollout, and we will be ready to distribute that before the end of the year to all of the recruitment companies within that are registered with the ERF. And from that perspective, we will be able to give you what is best practice within recruitment and what kind of things do you need to particularly look out for. So we're in the process of finalizing that at the moment.
Oh, that's good to know. Okay. Another question. How do we protect our personal information? Don't know how they worded that. How do we protect our personal information and how safe is it when using data privacy concern? I'm not too sure what that question means. Let me see. I'll just go in and see. I've got a couple more. Okay, so this is an anonymous one. How about if you use ChatGPT for social posts and turn off the training on their privacy portal? Once training is off, they say, do not train on your data.
Yeah, it's not retaining. Yes. So I suppose all of us are probably quite guilty of not using our privacy settings properly, of going in.
They ask, does it need to be mentioned still in privacy policies?
Well, I think if you're using ChatGPT full stop, yes, it does. Yes, it does. The also, I suppose, is it would be make sure that the data that's coming out of ChatGPT is accurate. It quite often it isn't. It appears to be accurate, but I have been instructed on 2 instances where employment contracts were drawn up and agreements were drawn up on ChatGPT, and in actual fact they left out massive areas, and companies have found themselves in a terrible state, and I've had to go in and try and fix it. So I suppose be careful that what comes out of ChatGPT needs to be verified. It is not wholly accurate, but the original point being about our privacy settings, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, we need to set privacy settings very clearly and ensure that in every way. I don't use Siri on my phone because it's listening to me, it's listening to my conversations. Suddenly, you talk about, I had to buy a coat this week. Yeah, I hate coats. So, but I was told I had to have a coat for the next few weeks as I'm campaigning. And I talked about it. And all of a sudden, on a different phone within my family, codes started going up. So I switch off all of those. It doesn't come up on my phone because I don't allow it. I have very strict. I clear my search. I clear all of those kind of things on a very, very regular basis, and I don't allow it, in fact, to gather that information in the first place. So in all of that, even within AI, you need to look for the privacy settings within it.
Okay, thanks very much. Good to know. Okay, we have another question here. Somebody just wants some clarification. It is against the law to upload a candidate's CV to ChatGPT, the paid version, and removing the name of the candidate isn't enough if the places they have worked, etc., would identify them.
Well, I suppose it depends. If it is closed and you have privacy settings and you have all of the rest, it's not that it's illegal. It's just that people need to know that that's likely to happen when they give over their data. So that's where it needs to be put into the privacy notice, and that there are AI systems are used to support your business and to make it more efficient, and that there are AI systems that all decision making can be appealed to, and ideally your data protection officer. So you need that mechanism in your privacy notice. None of this is illegal or unlawful, but what you've got to do is you've got to be transparent. You've got to have, you've got to make sure that that people know and understand, and that there is a purpose limitation on any information, on any use that you're putting in.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. Okay, I saw in the beginning of your presentation several suppliers for recruiting with AI. How do we know when we choose or which supplier to choose and what possible issues to be looking out for?
I suppose that's a really good question. We can't recommend anything to you. We can't. We're not saying that and I was very clear. I would stand over. I'm not recommending any of the ones. They were just ones that I've come across the industry, and I've heard of in the context of the WEC discussions. The World Employment Confederation discussions. I suppose what you're looking for is, what you need to set out is, what does your company want? What are you looking for? What are your objectives? So then when you're engaging with a supplier or a potential supplier, then that'll direct the questions that you're asking. And that will direct, I suppose, having a knowledge and thinking about GDPR and the fact that we are companies that are absolutely bound by GDPR, then in that context, you can start asking those sensitive questions. It may well be that you need to bring in somebody who is proficient in this area to guide you and assist you in that, and in the incorporation of AI into your organization. It may well be that you need to do that. That isn't a personal pitch for business. I'm just saying it may be. There are people out there who are specializing in the incorporation of AI, because there are ethical, employment law, and AI and GDPR considerations that must be taken into. But actually, if you're very clear about your objectives and the objectives of your company, that will frame the conversation.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, these questions coming in here faster than I can read them. Somebody wants to know, if we use LinkedIn Recruiter to source candidates, which creates a CV based on their profile, would we need to put that in our recruitment policy, or is that LinkedIn's responsibility?
Well, you are gathering in that data. So the minute that information comes into a CV database for you, you need to be advising, if you connect. So you pull in my CV from LinkedIn, and when you connect with me to offer me for to go for an interview for a job, you need to tell me how you got my data in the first place. That's an obligation under GDPR. So if you're transparent in all of that, you are operating a system within the LinkedIn program. But the minute you act on that for your own business purposes, then you must be transparent in how the data was gathered, how you came to decide on me, what was the decision making within that. So this suddenly becomes this ethical responsibility to say, well, you were selected as part of, because you have, I don't know, you're left-handed and they want a left-handed person only for this job because that's the nature of their desks, you know, and that's a silly version. But for things like that, you need to be transparent in the data, how people were selected and where the data came from. That has always been the way with LinkedIn and recruiters.
Okay, that's a good answer. Let me see. Could current policies and training around safe and appropriate internet usage cover AI usage, such as ChatGPT for seconded staff, or do they need to explicitly state AI? It's a bit of a few things in one.
Yeah, so I suppose I'm hearing what there's the policies.
Current
So sorry.
policies and training around safe, appropriate internet usage, would that cover AI usage such as ChatGPT for any seconded staff?
But I suppose it depends on who's giving the training. And the competence of the people that are giving the training. So you would want to be sure that people are that there is a competence around AI, that your internal policies need to do that, then the training of your employees. And then if you do have seconded staff, I assume is that agency workers, consultants, you need to start at your terms and conditions and make sure, where are you putting the risk for anybody that's seconded? Where are you? So in an ideal world, the terms and conditions that you have with your clients put the responsibility for anyone that is seconded onto, a bit like health and safety. So all of us are used to, if we deploy consultants or if we deploy temporary agency workers into our client's workplace, then they are responsible for their health and safety, but they're also responsible for their GDPR use. They're also responsible for their AI use. So I would say start at your terms and conditions. And then if you are running safe internet, if that is I suppose a particular offering that your company has, make sure it addresses AI and equips people with the questions that they're to ask their place of deployment and wherever their assignment is to, that they're saying, you know, what is the policy here, and that you're training people to seek the policy, to look for what are the protocols in that company.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think we've come to the end. Mary, I don't see any more questions there, but I think you've covered an awful lot and given us plenty to think of and to be mindful of. So thank you very much again, Mary Seery Kearney, for today. I suppose if you've any questions, pop them over to me and I can maybe run them past you again, Mary. But again, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.